The story of Zabit is one of the biggest what-ifs in MMA history. After having an extremely promising career early on and showing a ton of promise for the long term as well, Zabit recently announced that he's retiring from MMA as a whole. But quickly before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. The story of Zabit is certainly a sad one, at least from the MMA perspective. The fact that he had all the talent in the world and was showing so much success early on and decided to retire so early on, only at the age of 31, certainly constitutes for one of the biggest what-ifs in UFC history. But not only did Zabit have a really good record, obviously he also had some very impressive victories over guys like Calvin Kattar and Jeremy Stephens, which led to all the hype that he did end up having. But the great thing about Zabit was he was also super versatile. Not only was he very good on the feet, he was even better on the ground. And that versatility really takes fighters to the next level and potentially to a championship level, which a lot of people thought Zabit was headed in that direction. But let's quickly look at some of the skills that Zabit did have both on the feet and on the ground that would lead a lot of people to believe that he could have potentially been a champion and a champion for a long time as well. So starting with his skills on the feet, Zabit actually had some really nice boxing, and he also had some really nice head movement. Whether you talk about his jab, his left cross, his uppercut, his hook, Zabit really did have it all in terms of his boxing. But not only did he have really nice punches, he also had phenomenal kicks, and this was definitely the best part of his stand-up. Zabit had a really nice ability to throw the calf kick, a side kick to the body, a question mark kick to the head, or just a side kick to the head in general. He also had an ability to throw a front kick to the body. He had nice knees as well and timed them perfectly. Basically, Zabit did a really nice job at mixing in both his boxing and his kicks and his knees and elbows as well, obviously, in order to keep the other fighter guessing. But once the fight did get taken to the ground, Zabit was also phenomenal. He had a really nice ability to get the fight to the ground when he wanted to. When he did get the fight to the ground, he was very good at getting the right positions and either getting mount and throwing ground and pound shots that way and maybe getting the finish that way, or he also certainly had an ability to get submissions as well, whether you talk about the rear naked choke, an anaconda choke, arm bars, leg locks even, although he rarely used that. But basically what I'm saying is he really knew how to get the positions on the ground as well as the submissions. Now, although there certainly were a lot of great things about Zabit, there certainly were some negatives as well. Probably the first and main negative was the fact that he didn't necessarily have the most power, which obviously made sense due to the fact that he had a relatively slim frame. But the fact that he was still getting wins and looking very good doing it without a ton of power really kind of just showed you how good this guy really was. But another issue that Zabit definitely did have was with his gas tank, and he actually got surgery to fix that gas tank issue that he did have, which was also a big reason why a lot of people thought that Zabit could have potentially been a UFC champ for a while, because one of the bigger issues that he did have obviously was his gas tank. So if that surgery that he did have did fix his gas tank, just imagine how good this guy could potentially be. And at that point, probably the biggest issue, and maybe really the only issue with Zabit's game, would be the fact that he didn't necessarily have the most power. But if he basically had everything else down, it wouldn't really matter. And he could also potentially improve that as he gets more experience and as he gets more fights under his belt. But besides all the skill and talent that Zabit did have, probably the biggest disappointment of this is we weren't necessarily able to see Zabit fight guys like Max Holloway and Volkanovski. Because in a lot of people's opinions, and also in my opinion, if Zabit did continue to fight, I personally think he would be at the top of the division, and he would have been at the level of those other two guys in Max Holloway and Volkanovski. So it would have been very interesting to see if he would have potentially been able to beat one of, or maybe even both of those guys, which might sound crazy at this point for some who weren't able to watch Zabit, because obviously Max Holloway is Max Holloway and he's always been a very elite fighter. And when you talk about Volkanovski, he really took his game to the next level as of late, and he's certainly the second best pound for pound fighter in the UFC in my personal opinion. I think Kamaru Usman's a little bit better, but of course you could certainly make the argument, and I wouldn't be mad at people who say that Volkanovski is the best pound for pound fighter in the UFC. I certainly do think you can make that argument. But I certainly do think that Zabit would have at the very least been close to the level of those other two guys, and I'm certainly not the only one who thought this. A lot of people did. So although it is going to be pretty sad not seeing Zabit fight anymore in the UFC, and really just in MMA as a whole, it is nice to see from Zabit's personal perspective that he was able to find something else that he was passionate about, and he was able to find another avenue where he'd be able to make money, not only for himself, but also for his family. So from that perspective, I certainly am happy for him and do wish him luck long term. It just kind of stinks that he won't be fighting in the UFC anymore, and we wouldn't be able to see some of those fights that I mentioned before. But obviously, nonetheless, the UFC is still going to be extremely exciting going forward. There's a ton of amazing cards coming up. There's a great fight night coming up this weekend. UFC 276 is coming up, which is probably, in my opinion, the most stacked card that I've probably seen in a very, very long time. At least name value wise, we'll see how it actually turns out to be, but I certainly will be making a bunch of different videos on that card specifically. I'm very, very excited for that. Of course, Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards was recently announced as well, and although Kamaru is probably going to be a relatively big favorite, and he certainly should be, people should not be underestimating Leon Edwards, as he is also extremely talented both on the feet and on the ground as well to an extent. But overall, there are a ton of very, very exciting fights coming up on the horizon, and there's never been a better time to be a UFC fan than at this point. So that's kind of the story on how Zabit, who had a ton of talent and a ton of potential, ended up retiring relatively early on into his career and never ended up living up to those potential expectations that a lot of people had for him. But we'll see what happens in this upcoming matchup between Max Holloway and Volkanovski, and we'll see if anybody else in the division ends up coming up and getting to the level of those other two guys. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think if Zabit never retired, he could have potentially been on the level of a Max Holloway or an Alexander Volkanovski and a potential champion at that division, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.